for today. Well, as founders ourselves, we do realize that it's a lot of work running businesses. And so your time is really precious. That's why we are really thankful that you could take this time and join us. Karumba, karibu sana from Nairobi. Damaris Dungwa, speaker for next week. Karibu sana. Thanks for creating the time to join us. So we hope to make the next 60 minutes worth your while. We try and keep it within the 1 hour that we've allocated. And so it's a quick run through the structure of our webinar today is just starting us off. I'll give you a bit of background on Founders Freedom as your hosts. And then we'll turn this over to our speaker for the day, who should be taking anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes to walk us through his content. And we'll use that same time to also take Q&A at the end of the presentation. And then we'll sign off. Joyce will handle the later part of this webinar to walk us through what's coming up next. So here's a quick background on Founders Freedom. Our vision is to create a community of successful multi-generational African-owned businesses. And you would ask, well, so what's informing this vision? There are two quick things. On one hand, when you think about it, in the African context, most African countries gained independence between 1960 and say in 1980, thereabouts. And so to truly appreciate African-owned businesses, that will be about the time that we saw the early founders of African-owned businesses, for the most part. And now, 50, 60 years later, we're just beginning to see some of those initial founders transitioning, transferring their wealth to the next generation. And there's a lot that we're reading and seeing of the challenges and the struggles of setting up businesses that can last generations. The second thing is from our experience. Joyce and myself have a combined about 30 years experience working and serving across the Africa region, forming and serving on boards, hiring and training leadership teams, and developing systems. So that's become an area of experience and expertise for us. And that has just really helped us appreciate the value of building businesses that can last several generations. And that's really explains our mission of helping founders build firm foundations that enable their businesses to run in their absence and last generations. We do this in 4 parts. We've identified these 4 areas as our areas of focus, starting with strategy, which essentially is about helping the founder document their vision. It's one thing for you to found your business, have grand ideas of where you want to take this business, develop it into a multinational, whatever success looks like for you. But having you document that then allows you to engage with other stakeholders you need to execute your vision. You're going to need investors. You're going to need management team to work with. You're going to need customers for your business. So having your vision documented then becomes really, really crucial. So everybody knows where they plug in. The second thing that we work on is structure. And this essentially is an accountability mechanism that allows you as a founder to follow through on the things that you set out to do. Our third aspect is systems. In effect, meaning how do you standardize your way of doing things so you have consistency and increased efficiencies? That's a really, really key aspect of and a building block of founding businesses that can last and run in your absence. People are not constantly on the phone calling you about every small business decision. The last part is staff. How do you attract and retain the right skill set to help your business succeed? How do you replicate yourself so everything does not rise and fall in your presence? We deliver this in 3 main areas. One of those is enlightening, which is in effect is creating awareness. in events like webinars, what we have today. Excuse me. And this is a way of creating awareness that allows you then to have information that you can act on. And part of acting on that information is the second part, which is equipping founders through tools and templates, either in workshops or in one-on-one sessions, where we get to work with you to apply. If it's formulating your strategy, we've got tools and templates. You can either do it by yourself, or depending on the size of your business, we can help you formulate a longer-term strategy for your business. Document your strategies and automate it, attract and retain high-level staff, or put in place an accountability mechanism, recruit and onboard your board members. Finally is engage, which is a really exciting aspect of our business that looks to create a community of founders who are working to create businesses that can then run in their absence. And we get to come together in different events that allows us to learn from each other, and also from founders that have been able to walk this journey and found freedom. And so to our topic for today, we did conduct a survey not too long ago among the clientele that we're serving and people that would make an ideal clientele for us. And on the question, which is about our topic for today on structure, the question was, who do you talk to? Who is holding you accountable in the decisions you make in your business? And 60% of the respondents from our survey said they either consult a spouse or a trusted friend as they make very important decisions about their businesses. And we do realize as founders ourselves that you are faced with many decisions every day. And so the question for us is, how do you increase confidence in your decisions by surrounding yourself with the right people? How do you invite and engage with others to hold you accountable so you follow through on the things you said you would do? And where do you find these right people, right? So that is what we are hoping to unpack in our webinar today. And we just have the right person to speak to us. One of the things you'll have noticed in the past two webinars, we're running a 4-part series. So we've had 2 webinars already. One was on systems. Last week, we had a strategy. We're really big at Founders Freedom. We are deliberately big on collaborations and partnerships. And so Joyce and I are members of the Institute of Directors, Kenya. And that's where we met our speaker for today, Meshack Joram, who is the CEO of IOD Kenya. And I'm sure you've read some of his bio that we shared in the flyer. And Meshack has tremendous experience in corporate governance in Kenya and beyond, an aspect we believe, if well embraced, can professionalize the running of businesses. So Meshack, we're very thankful for the partnership between Founders Freedom and IOD in bringing corporate governance to running of businesses through recruitment and training of board members. And so we're thankful that you can join us today and be our speaker on this webinar. And the main question we are hoping you'll help us unpack is, how do our participants today understand how embracing corporate governance can increase confidence in their business decisions? Karibu sana, Meshack. Meshack,
thank you, Martin, for that introduction. I really appreciate, and thank you for to all the participants for finding time to be here this afternoon. And I look forward to exciting engagements as we go through this conversation. I'm calling it a conversation. I'm not looking at it really as just a presentation. I'm hoping we can be able to have some robust conversations around this topic. I will go straight ahead and share my screen so that we can start. I had prepared a presentation, and I'm hoping that you are able to see my screen now. You can give me a thumbs up, Joyce, if that's good. Thank you. So our topic is, how do we increase confidence in our decisions, especially as business owners, as those who are involved in running businesses and constantly faced by critical decisions that we need to make that have impact beyond just we as the owners, but also has impact on the various stakeholders that we interact with. My presentation has the following outline. I'll give some little bit of background information just for us to appreciate. I was made to understand that most of the participants in this platform are SME owners, so we'll just get some information around that. We'll get to appreciate the decision-making process, especially for small businesses. And then what is the challenge when it comes to decision-making, especially for SMEs? And then look at some pointers in terms of how do we enhance good decision-making for business leaders. I'll spend about 25 to 30 minutes on this, and then we will have a session where we are going to have some Q&A, and Joyce will be able to guide that process of the Q&A. So in terms of the background, and I picked this information, caveat participants is that a lot of the information that I'm sharing is not my information. It's information that I've obtained from different sources, largely the World Bank. I've borrowed a lot from what the World Bank has done in this area of engaging with SMEs. But I've also borrowed some information from the Ministry of Industrialization, Trade and Enterprise Development, sessional paper number 5 of 2020. They define micro enterprise as a business activity whose annual turnover is below $1 million shillings and likely employs less than 10 people. A small enterprise, they define it as a business activity whose annual turnover ranges between $1 million shillings and 5 million shillings and likely employs between 10 and 50 people. That therefore means that a large SME would typically be defined as a business activity whose annual turnover is over 5 million and likely employs over 50 people. The caveat here, of course, is that these definitions will definitely vary depending on the geographic location of a business. From my experience, when you look at an SME in a developed economy, for example, if you go to South Africa, the kind of a turnover that they'll be doing, the number of employees that they would have would maybe vary from an economy maybe like Kenya or Uganda or any other, but the structures and the ways of operation tend to be very similar, and we'll be looking at that. So that is the caveat, that the definitions, of course, will vary, but this is what is presented to us from a Kenyan perspective. So having done that background, the next question, of course, is what is the definition from the World Bank, and what are some of the stages of growth and the decision-making process that SMEs go through? The first phase is what is referred to as the startup business, and this is the stage 1. The key indicators for decision-making and oversight at this stage is that decision-making is very highly centralized, and the decision is largely made by the founder. The leadership style, therefore, is largely autocratic because nobody then really gets to question what the founder decides. And at this stage of the business, the focus is usually on developing products, testing the market, just getting into the market and getting to appreciate that the market is going to embrace our business, that the market is willing to engage with us in terms of what we are offering. And so the style in terms of decision-making is largely autocratic. There's very little consultation that takes place, and it is very highly centralized. This then leads to phase 2, which is the active growth stage. And the indicators in terms of decision-making and oversight here is that we begin to see some emergence of delegation to management. At this phase, the business is beginning to grow. Structures are beginning to be put in place. So there could be additional team members who are on board. They are fairly empowered to support the founder in terms of decision making. And so slowly by slowly, there is some element of delegation that comes to play. In addition to that, there is more consultation. And so there's consultative leadership style, still largely autocratic, but with a lot of input from key managers and a few advisors. For the business entity, the focus is really on sales and growth. There's a question of, can we increase the variety of our products or our services? Is our client base growing? Do we have an existing client base, and is it growing? If we don't have one, can we begin to really consolidate that client base? So this is the second stage. And from the perspective of the World Bank, they refer to it as the active growth stage. From the active growth stage, we move to stage number 3, which is the organizational development stage. The business is continuing to grow. In terms of decision-making and oversight, you begin to hire professional managers who can be able to support with decision-making. There is more decentralization in terms of authority because there are functional heads, and the management style and the decision-making style increasingly becomes more collaborative. So the owner of the business realizes that I need to collaborate with other managers. I need to collaborate with other players that I've been able to bring on board. And in making decisions, then I engage more closely. We collaborate, we discuss to get to a point where we can make a good decision. The focus, of course, at this stage is really on structures and processes, and Martin mentioned this in the introduction. The focus is, how do we optimize on the structures and the processes that we've put in place so that we can be able to, move to the next level. Many times when you engage with businesses that are at this stage, they are always thinking about what is the next phase of our growth? What is the next phase of our business in terms of development? What other structures do we need to put in place so that we can move to the next level of the business? Here, most likely, the position is that the clientele base is fairly solid. So the business owner has a lot of confidence in trying to ensure that they are able to move to the next level, because they've tested the market, the products or the services have been appreciated by the market and by the clients. And so there's a lot of confidence. This automatically then leads to stage number 4, which we are calling the business expansion phase. In business expansion, as the name suggests, there is further growth supported by improved internal organization and processes. Here now, you find the financial systems are fairly developed. You have more inclination to engage with external parties. Your bank has become a very good friend of yours. Your financials have become your key partners in terms of your business growth. And in terms of your decision-making and oversight, there is a very clear separation of the strategic and the operational decision-making process. The institutional decision-making style, it's based on very defined structures, roles, and procedures, because the business is really expanding. So you can no longer let that decision be based on an individual. At this phase of the business growth, mostly you find there are different departments. If you have a business development department or a manufacturing department or an operations department, you have key heads that have been identified or they've grown through the system and they are heading those departments. And as a result of that, they are able to engage with the owner when it comes to decision-making and oversight. And so those are the four stages when it comes to growth and the decision-making process. This then leads me to a critical question. Martin had indicated that on a day-to-day basis, one of the things that I do is to teach corporate governance. And this leads me to just very briefly give us an appreciation of corporate governance, and then I'll link that to the whole question of decision-making. Classic corporate governance developed initially for large public traded companies, and it's defined from the perspective of three key matters. And this is direction, control, and accountability. So we look at, when we think about corporate governance, you think about those three critical aspects. And this is the traditional or the classic approach to corporate governance. Of course, we know that with the changes that are taking place in the dynamic environment that we are in, the classic definition of corporate governance has evolved. We are now looking at aspects of ESG, good corporate citizenship. But from a classic perspective, those are the critical components that we think about. And the focus really is on the interaction among three key decision-making bodies when you look at that classical approach of corporate governance definition. One is the shareholders. And these are the people who own assets. They provide the capital to the business and appoint the board to oversee how that capital is applied. The board then sets the strategic direction. They provide oversight in terms of supervision on the performance of management, and they report to the shareholders on stewardship. Usually this is done at an annual general meeting or on special meetings that the board will have with shareholders to give an account of how the resources that the shareholders have put in the business have been applied into the business. The third aspect is management, who use the assets and the capital that is provided by the shareholders to realize a positive return for them and report on their performance to the board. So you can see there are three distinct layers when it comes to the classic corporate governance and decision-making. You're looking at the shareholders, the board, and the management. And herein then lies the dilemma for SMEs, because for many SMEs, these three roles are all rolled into one. You are the business owner. As the business owner, you are a shareholder because you put in your money to run the business, to capitalize the business. At the same time, you don't have a board, so you play the role of a director. And you're also involved in the day-to-day running, so you are also the manager. And all those roles are rolled into one. And that is then the genesis of the dilemma of business owners or founders when it comes to decision-making. Because you're wearing different hats, you have to look at the business from different perspectives, from different angles, and you have the critical duty and responsibility of making a decision that is or should be in the best interest of the business. And therefore, this leads us to the challenge of decision-making for SMEs. The culture and practice of decision-making has been recognized as one of the key defining factors or parameters of SMEs. The focus here is on how decisions are made in the business setup. And like I've said, you want to make this decision wearing those different hats and making sure that you're making the decision in the best interest of the organization. On one side, you're looking at it from the angle of a shareholder. From another side, you're looking at the business from the angle of a director. And again, you're involved in the day-to-day running of the business. It can be a very challenging and difficult process. So what are some of the challenges then that you face even as you go through the decision-making in the business? Number one is information overload. Too much information or lack of complete information. Excess information to consider makes decision-making very difficult. As a founder of a business, as an SME owner, sometimes you're faced with myriad information decision that you have to make. You have a lot of information that flows to you from different angles because you're playing all these multiple roles, and that can be a challenge in itself. At times, you also have incomplete information that then hinders you from being able to make your decisions. The critical success factor when it comes to information overload or lack of complete information is you have to identify what are the key factors that you need to be able to focus on so that you can be able to make your decision. What is the most important information? What are these critical factors that you need to be aware of as you make your decision? The other challenge is, of course, the question of time, resources, and conflicting priorities. The issue of conflicting priorities, of course, naturally arises as a result of the different hats that you wear as the business owner. But again, as business owner, as a founder, you have the pressure of time and resources because of those multiple roles that you play. You have to be able to make decisions on time. And many SME owners and founders find themselves in a situation where there's a lot of pressure in terms of the time you have. And that then impacts on the decisions that you make. A critical success factor is that you need to then be very clear in terms of your priorities and where necessary, be able to delegate the decision making. And we will be referring to the Eisenhower matrix just to guide us in that process later on. The other challenge is, of course, and this is something that many business owners face, is the fear of making wrong decisions. For many SMEs, making a wrong decision can be a very costly affair because you've tied a lot of your resources to the business. Perhaps you have borrowed from either friends or from the bank or from other avenues. And therefore, you're very careful with the decision that you want to make that will impact on the business. There is always the risk of unintended consequences, and therefore that in itself presents a matter that generates a lot of fear for many business owners. What are some of the success factors when it comes to the fear of making wrong decisions? You try and mitigate the risk by considering different scenarios and planning ahead. Of course, as they say, failing to plan is a recipe for failure. Having a mastermind group to help in times of important decisions, making trusted advisors can be of great help. Having trusted advisors, and I'll be speaking to that later on as well. Number 4, of course, is the question of personal values and beliefs. And of course, in the environment we find ourselves in, there are a lot of political and social considerations that we also make as business owners when it comes to decision making. Naturally, our personal biases will cloud our objectivity. And of course, our personal experiences as well influences our outlook of the business and impact our decision making. I have interacted with business owners who sometimes have to make critical decisions, but because of the biases that they have, some of these biases could be historical, based on information that you received about something that happened in the past. That in itself impacts how you make your decision and even the decision that you make in terms of the business. Social considerations. I have interacted with the business owners who at times have to make a decision as to whether they want to interact with people of a certain orientation, maybe from a religious perspective or from a cultural perspective. And those biases impact the decisions that we make. You were about to sign a contract with someone from a very different, maybe social or cultural upbringing in terms of how they look at contracts. And that in itself impacts your decision making. What are some of the critical success factors when we consider this? Is you need to be aware of your biases and the values that influence your decisions. You need to have a lot of self-awareness. And again, the critical question of whether you have a sounding board or trusted advisors who can be able to check some of your biases. I mentioned this matrix that really is of great help when it comes to decision making. As a founder, as an SME owner, you need to have an appreciation of what are the important decisions you need to make. What are the urgent decisions that you need to make? What are the decisions which may not be so important and they may not be very urgent? If you have an important decision and it is urgent, then it means you need to do it immediately. You need to think about the deadlines. You need to think about what are the consequences if I don't make this decision. You could be having some decisions which are urgent, but they are not very important. The recommendation here is you need to delegate such decisions. These are tasks that you must get done, but they don't require your specific skill set. They may not require that you urgently address them. So these are decisions that you can easily be able to delegate to your teams to support with the process. You also have decisions that may not be very urgent, but they are important. This requires scheduling. You need to, these are tasks with unclear deadlines that contribute to long-term success. You need to know when to schedule those decisions. But then there are some decisions which are not urgent, they're not important, and these can be distractions. So you need to know when to eliminate or completely just remove them from your head so that you focus on the urgent and important decisions. What is the evolution in terms of decision making? And then taking us back to the 4 stages that we talked about earlier, we need to ask ourselves, what are the processes we need to go through as we go into decision making? The critical goal here is that we want to be able to make decisions which are optimal, decisions which are in the best interest of the organization, and at every stage of our business evolution, we need to know how we can be able to make these decisions. In the first stage, here you have a lot of informal external advisors, largely because you are the founder, you are alone, so you really don't have a sounding board as yet. But in your decision making, you need to have people who you can be able to engage with to support with your decision making process. Your structures are, as at yet, really not in place. You're grappling with funding the business. You're grappling with putting, even getting the business going in terms of establishing your market. And so the recommendation here is identify what we call informal external advisors who can be able to be part of your decision-making process. As your business grows and you move to the second stage, you begin to put structures in place. You've identified your clientele. There is potential for growth of the business. You can clearly see that there is a great potential in terms of the service or the product uptake. So you begin then to engage external advisors formally. And formally here means that then you are beginning to give them information about your business. They are beginning to get involved in the decision making and appreciating the activities that you're undertaking as a business. And so it is a very formalized engagement, but still they are external advisors. They are not insiders yet, but the engagement is fairly formal. This then leads you to the next phase. And this is where now you have continuous and structured outside advice from different advisors. And this is now a continuous process. In corporate governance, at this phase, we begin to imagine that you're having regular meetings. You're having structured meetings with your advisors, and it's a continuous process. You could be having meetings with your advisors maybe once every month or once every 2 months. And at every critical stage of decision making, there is a very structured engagement that are taking place. Most likely at this phase, you are at this phase or stage of growth, you are also engaging with external financiers. You could be engaging with advisors either from an operations perspective or from a HR perspective. And so there is need for that continuous and very structured engagement. Of course, the final stage is where you really have a board in place. And a board now would mean that the entity has really evolved and it's gotten to the phase where you can be able now to formally engage a board of directors to support with the oversight that is required, the oversight in the aspect of finance, oversight in operations, oversight in terms of risk, oversight broadly in different aspects of the business. So the decision-making process need to take this evolution in phase, knowing where you are, at what stage are you in as a business owner, and how at every stage of your evolution, you can be able to engage players, different players to support with the decision-making process. Coming to conclusion, number one, in good corporate governance, decision-making is a collective process. I think that is the bottom line. If you want to be able to have a good sleep at night as a business owner, you need to be able to share the burden of decision-making. And we say it is a collective process. There are different players who are involved in an effective and efficient decision-making process. Be able to identify who are these different players who can be able to support the decision-making process in my organization, in my business. A good decision is one that is made with the available information and resources, and that leads to a positive outcome. That is a good decision. But we should not end it there. We should be striving to attain optimal decisions. And an optimal decision is one that leads to the best possible outcome, given all the available information and resources. And the keyword here is best possible outcome and all the available information and resources. And that is what any business owner should be striving to achieve, that the decisions that you make are based on the availability of all the information that you need to get. As you make that decision, you've taken into consideration all the available resources, and the decision that you're making in the best interest of your business is optimal in that respect. My last quote is by Steve Jobs. It doesn't make sense to hire smart people and tell them what to do. We hire smart people so that they can tell us what to do. And that is the whole essence of having a board of directors, having advisors who can be able to guide us in our decision-making process. Ladies and gentlemen, I rest my case and hand the meeting back to Joyce. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Meshack. That was a really good presentation. I like how you were able to walk us through the different kinds of businesses and the different stages. I'm sure everyone could see where their business is at, how they are running right now with the decision making, and how they can improve what they have been doing. So hopefully we've learned a few things. And so we have like 15 or so minutes remaining. And maybe for the next 10 or so minutes, we can have question and answers session. You can put your questions in the Q&A box, or if you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand and I will allow you to speak. So I'll give you a moment for anyone who has a question or a comment.
Joyce, with your permission, so that the room is not too quiet, maybe I can engage the participants because I'm seeing I can see their names in the room. I will start by calling perhaps Lorraine Odhiambo to maybe just, Lorraine, you can share your thoughts on the presentation. Is Lorraine available? If Lorraine is not ready, I can see Alexander Habte. Alexander, feel free to share your thoughts.
Let me see if I can allow him to talk.
I think Lorraine must have been attempting to speak. If you'd unmute them, Alexander as well.
Yeah, Alexander has unmuted.
I'm seeing
It looks like
Karumba's hand is raised as well.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karumba. I just want to share something I learned once about having a board of advisors and having a board of directors. So a lot of times a board of advisors, you are able to maybe also sit on the advisory council or body so that you offer each other like-for-like services. But what was mind-blowing to me in my consulting work is I found this organization that had 8 small organization had about 6 board members, and I was asking the CEO, isn't it very, very expensive to have so many board members? They told me no. These people, we pay them an allowance, let's say 20K, 20,000 per city, or maybe 25. We have 4 meetings in a year. That is 100K in 1 year. And yet I'm able to access this wonderful resource every time I need because they're in my board. So he told me there are some my staff I pay more than that, but they don't offer much value. These people, I require them to sit a whole morning, a whole day, once every quarter for a meeting. And that changed my perspective because many people assume that having a board of directors is expensive, but even if you start with 2 or 3, that's an expense of 300,000. And even if you're paying them 10,000 per sitting, it's good to pay something to honor their time and feel. In a whole year, you spend only 40,000 and you're able within reason to reach to them in between time. And some of them can even offer to sit on your board for some little shareholding, and still others may not want you to pay them right away. So for you to access a high quality resource and you are paying them 40K a year, 80K in 1 year, or around that figure, it's usually very good. And they're likely probably to open doors for you, advise you, and it's okay to call them in between once in a while, not every time, and get your help. And if somebody is looking for a board of director and they are very serious and they don't run a corrupt business, maybe you can talk to me and I may be help, but you can get my contacts from Founders Freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Karumba. Meshack, would you like to say anything to that?
No, that was very spot on. Thank you, Karumba, for that. And yes, I think I like that comment. Sometimes we think that it is costly to have a board, but when you think about the value that you derive from that board, then you realize that the benefits far outweigh the cost of having that board in place. So thank you for that, Karumba.
I see a comment and a question from Alexander. He says that his mic is having some problems, but I really enjoyed the presentation. It was very informative. So my company I just founded is at its inception stage, but after having discussions with my team, we are leaning on going with a non-profit route. Would the presented template apply to a non-profit setup?
Thank you, Alexander. I have had interactions with NGOs in Kenya. And so when you talk of non-profit, I'm imagining it's structured closely to how NGOs are structured. And the practice right now in that sector is that increasingly they are also going into having boards of directors and having that kind of a structure. When it comes to decision making, it is not just decisions for the benefit in terms of profit, but the decisions could also be in terms of the influence and the impact that you have on your various stakeholders. And that goes beyond the profit element. So to answer your question, yes, it's very much applicable. We have engaged with small and big NGOs that are moving in the direction of putting proper governance structures in place. Thank you.
Doris, if I may, thank you, Meshack. I'm particularly thankful for that question by Alexander. I'm trying to remember whether he joined us last week when we were tackling strategy. And a similar question came up in the not-profit. We're not using money as a metric to measure success. We're using impact. Does this whole strategy business apply to us? So I'm really, really thankful you could join us today, Alexander. Hopefully this has been helpful, like you've heard from Meshack. I think whatever metric you're using to measure success, the key here is helping with decision-making and making sure you follow through in executing the quality decisions you've been able to make as a result of the additional voices and different perspectives we bring to the table.
Thank you, Alexander. We've seen your responses in the Q&A section. Does anyone else have a comment or a question before we close?
Joyce, I'm just thinking we have very few people in the room. Can we maybe hear from one or two others? Lucy Njoroge?
Okay. Lucy, I'll allow you to talk.
All right. Rosemary Kantai, a comment? Or a feedback? It's also good to give feedback as well.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Meshack, and thank you for that great presentation. Sometimes one needs to hear it and to hear it from others for them to know the direction. I am more in consulting, but every time that you're dealing with a business, there's always this struggle whereby you're trying to get people to have a board and they keep saying that they won't because it's too expensive. So listening to that and listening to the comments that have been made, then I start realizing that at a certain point, it is important to show the value that the board would bring so that for the people, they stop seeing that it is too expensive. So for me, it is like an eye-opener. And I thank you that the presentation came at this point because I can see some of the things that I can hear some of the questions in my mind of some of the people who have raised certain questions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you, Rosemary. I appreciate it.
So we have about 5 more minutes.
All right. One more person. I'm seeing there is Lacon Obadiah.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I was just blown away by the last screen where there was a statement, there was a saying by Steve Jobs that you do not hire smart people so you could tell them what to do. You hire them so that they can tell you what to do. And I think for me that just hit the whole presentation home. And it's quite important to realize that as much as an SME may have people in it that know what should be done, a board or could be a governance board or could be an advisory board would go a long way to establish the future of such an entity. So I really appreciate this presentation. Thank you, Martin, for seeking me out and inviting me for this. I appreciate this.
Thank you very much. Joyce, over to you now. I appreciate, thank you all of you for the comments and for finding time. I really appreciate, and this presentation, I believe, will be shared by Founders Freedom. Thank you.
Yes, it will. Thank you so much for coming for the webinar today. So I'll just share a few things that we would like to share with you about what's happening next with Founders Freedom. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us or to reach out to Meshack. We'll put his details of how to contact him in the chat box. I think Martin will type them there. So at the beginning of this webinar, Martin mentioned that we do this in three different ways: enlightening, equipping, and engaging. So we have a few things coming up under each of those three areas. The first is a similar webinar to what you've had today. Next week will be focused on staff, and that will be building a high performance team. So please sign up for that as early as possible so that you can remember and join in next week. It will be done by Damaris Ndungwa, who is the Director of OD and Learning at Blue Concepts Africa. And it's going to be a very exciting session. So please sign up as soon as you can so that you don't forget to attend. The next would be under the equipping section, where we are putting together a business freedom workshop in partnership with the International Leadership University. And the dates for that are soon to be decided. But if you'd like to attend something like that, definitely look out for information on that, or even reach out to us and express your interest so that we can have you listed, so that we can let you know when it is going to happen. Under equipping you also, we are open to working with you one-on-one in any of the 4 areas that we mentioned in strategy, structure, systems, or staff. So you can reach out to us if your business needs any help in any of those 4 areas, or if you really are wondering where you need help with business freedom and you're wondering exactly which area you need to work on, you can reach out to us. We can help you assess where your business is at right now and which area would be best for you to start with to work on. And the third is one of the areas that you find the most exciting, which is under engagement. So when we did our survey, we found that 92% of the founders want to have a community of founders who are building businesses and run their absence, just like they're trying to. And so on the 20th of August, we are having a fireside chat session where we are going to bring a founder who has built their business to a point where it can run in their absence. So they've managed to attain that money and time freedom that we are also working towards attaining. So if we will be sending the details of the fireside chat on the 20th of August out, and would love for very many of you to attend. Definitely there'll be limited spaces for people to attend, and probably on a first come, first serve basis, but would like to have as many of there as possible. So look out for that information. We'll send it via email. We'll reach out to you individually. And if you'd like to reach out to us, first of all, our social media handles. We are on LinkedIn, we are on Instagram and Facebook, and on YouTube, where this recording will be uploaded with other previous recordings. You can email us at hello@foundersfreedom.org, or you can even call us on that number, 0706 941 002. Our website is foundersfreedom.org. And thank you so much for attending the webinar today. We've been happy to have you, and we've been very happy to have you, Meshack. That was a good talk, and maybe one day we can have you back to even speak to us about other aspects of structure, governance, and governance. So, Martin, would you like to add anything before we close?
No, just really, really thankful for everybody that joined us for the webinar today. Thank you for some of you that have been part of this conversation the past 2 weeks, and you're able to join in today. Next week, Tuesday, sometime 2 to 3 p.m. Nairobi time, we'll have our last of this 4-part series talking about staff, as Jez mentioned. And yeah, we're just really looking forward to welcoming you to join part of the free founders community, where you get to learn, encourage each other, and grow together. So thanks again, and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.